All right, everybody, we are back with an exciting episode. And this is going to be one that we're going to try our best to describe to you what it should look like, because we know that y'all are listening, not watching. But we have the infamous Jeff Mattocks on today, and he is going to talk about, in this episode, the exciting world of manure. Y'all have asked, what's wrong with my bird? And several people have laughed at me when I said, can you send me a picture of their crap and their feed tag? We're going to have Jeff on here, and we're going to let him explain what different crap looks like, what we're looking for, and how to do it. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
You ready to tell us about mycotoxins and all those good indicators that let people know what the crap is wrong with their chicken when they look at their crap?
Yeah, you can tell a lot by looking at the droppings. So
What is the mycotoxin?
Mycotoxin, and that's in the early slides that we have, but nobody's going to see that. But a mycotoxin, so when you have a mold or a fungus so penicillin, because it is the byproduct of a bread mold, could be considered a mycotoxin. So it is what is left behind after a bacteria or a fungus has lived and expired and died. So it's a secondary metabolite, right? So it's a chemical compound. This is a show about poop. So it is basically the poop of fungus and bacteria. There's the easy way to say it. So it's what's left behind after molds and toxins, or after molds and funguses have lived and died. That's the easiest way to say it.
That's pretty simple.
Complex and chemical. Yeah. That's the easiest way to think about it. Now, if a PhD that has a degree in microbiology watches this show or listens to this show, they're going to be like, that's not what it is. Okay. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. Okay.
All right. So why are they important?
Because if you actually go to the BioMin website, you'll find that 80% of all the grain samples that they pull in and do random testing all over the world, not just here in the grand old United States, all test positive for mycotoxins. These organisms actually live in the soil, and they're waiting for a prime opportunity, whether it's weather stress, too much rain, not enough rain, whatever. If the plant's under stress, then these molds or funguses will start growing on the plant. And so they're going to be there. But because of our agricultural system being bigger, faster, or whatever, and they say better, but it's really not. And the theory of no-till farming, where you just go out there and spray it and kill it and then plant right into whatever's left, you actually leave behind enough crop residue from the previous crop to keep those spores alive for the different molds and funguses. So if we're seeing a higher and higher contamination rate, and so when the plant is really small, when it's a seedling coming out of the ground, if we get a heavy rain, it'll splash dirt or manure or whatever they used up onto the tissue of the plant, right? So it's high enough up on the plant that dirt residue will remain as the plant matures. And in the final stages of ripening off, where you have highly condensed starches and energies, right? You get another rain or you get that stress event, and it gets a chance to grow like fusarium on a wheat crop or a barley crop or something like that. It actually looks pretty big. You can go out there and you can see it. And then eventually it'll go to this blackish gray, kind of musty looking But in the early stages, it's got a kind of a pretty purplish pink hue to it. Some are blue, but most of them are pink. But
So what?
Grim go silent.
Yeah. Like, I'm just thinking, the
Want
different.
me to wind up the cat again?
So, no, let me ask this. That all happens when the grains are still in the ground or in the fields or wherever they're at. I saw this recently on one of the groups. Somebody got a bag of feed wet and they're like, what's the best way to dry it out? If I have a bag of feed that gets soaked in the rain, how much time do I have before that crap becomes toxic and starts growing mold?
You have about 24 hours. Depends on the feed. If it's whole grain or if we're talking like mash and pellets, you've got 24 hours.
Okay.
If I had grains, like someone was trying to ferment it, I could probably sneak that along for maybe 2 days. And here's the thing. As soon as that bag, if it gets really wet inside, birds like wet feed. There's no doubt about that they like wet clumping. So if you feed it soon enough, right, you catch it, you've seen it, right, you can open that bag up and you can get it out there in front of as many birds as possible, right, and get through it that first 12 to 24 hours. You really don't have a problem. Okay. Everything after that 24-hour mark is a gamble on what's grown. So a lot of those seeds still have active spores on them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you've heard me, and I discourage people from doing the fermented feed thing, right? It really bothers me because I don't know how many active mold or fungus spores are still alive and viable in that bag of feed they bought, whether it's pellet, crumble, whole grain, whatever.
And that's just because you don't know the source. You don't know if it's what kind of pesticide they sprayed on it. You don't know any of
I don't
that.
know anything. I don't know none of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me back up for just a minute. So you were talking about how the plant grows and then the water splashing up, and that's where the mycotoxins come from. So now we're translating that into the bag of feed, and when you get it wet, that's what takes off the ground, makes it bad.
Right. Okay. So when the plant is still a seedling, right, when it's down in what they call the flag stage, where it's 1 or 2 leaves out of the ground, right, and depending on your weather, like I said, if you get a heavy thunderstorm, a really heavy downpour, it's going to splash soil particles up off the ground onto the plant tissue. Okay. And they're going to stay there as long as the plant grows, especially, okay, we've all seen a young plant, right? It comes up and it makes a V. Okay. So if that dirt or that soil, I hate to call it dirt, soil's a living creature, but if you splash some of that soil up into that crown or that opening between those 2 leaves, okay, it's going to stay there forever, right? And it's going to grow with the plant and it's going to feed on the moisture of the plant. And every time you get rain, it lives there and it's going to be viable. So throughout the life cycle of the plant, no matter what crop we're talking about, that it's going to transfer right through. It's going to keep on going. And then when that plant decides to ripen off, right, when it makes its grain, it sets fruit, however you want to refer to it, now you have that high carbohydrate, high starch environment it's a perfect breeding ground or growing ground for that fungus or that bacteria to do something, to continue its life cycle, right? It's trying to live too, just like the plant. So it's gonna, and in the South, where you all are, we tend to see more like aflatoxin and some mycotoxins. In the North, we don't have the heat stress usually. So we don't have an extended period of heat stress. So we don't fight as much aflatoxin which is a different category, but it's still part of the mycotoxin family. So there's a bunch of different mycotoxins out there. Most labs will test for 11 or 12 different types or strains. It's not a cheap test. Last time I looked, it was about $88 to do a mycotoxin test. But you got bad feed, you could lose $88 in a hurry if you've got a breeding flock or you've got high dollar birds, show birds, whatever.
See, that's why when I saw them talking about, I saw one person say, lay a tarp out and put a fan on it and this, that, and the other. And I was like, you're probably at a $20 bag of feed and you're risking that. Like, how many birds do you have? Just go feed the crap out of them and let them eat off of it. Do something, but get rid of it over the next couple of days. Again, that's one of the reasons why I like to have pigs on the farm. Because you get some wet chicken feed.
Now, hold on. Because pigs have a lower tolerance for mycotoxins than poultry do. You start feeding moldy crap to a pig, and you're going to lose pigs in a hurry. Okay. So, again, the 12 to 24 hour mark. But they have a lower threshold or tolerance for most of those mycotoxins than a chicken does. And the big one that we were talking about before, the Dawn vomitoxin. Take a really close look at that name, vomit toxin. You know how it got its name? Because they discovered that
a guy named Don
vomit. No, that's the technical word, but it got the vomitoxin because it will actually cause pigs to vomit.
That's what I thought you were saying. Okay.
Yeah, that's for real.
The mycotoxin. Way back. If the mycotoxin's getting on the grain at the plant stage, and let's just assume we don't water our bags of feed on our daily basis, is it important? Is the amount of mycotoxins in the feed important, or is there anything we can do about it?
Look, all your big feed manufacturers, doesn't matter whether it's Tucker, whether it's Kalmbach, whether it's Cargill, whether it's Purina, I don't care. You name one. And every one of those is actually, if you read, reading down through the ingredient list, I know how to pick it apart and know, what things are in there for. But they're all adding a mycotoxin binder or a protective agent against those mycotoxins. Now, when you get the feed wet, all bets are off, right? Because now you have just put too much salt in the soup and you can't back up at that point. Okay. Yeah, the best thing you can do, you get a wet bag of feed, you feed as much of it as you can in a 24-hour period, and the rest of it goes to the compost pile. Okay. And that is your safest option, right? Mix it in the compost pile.
So out of curiosity, what's the binder called?
Yeah, give us some examples.
There's a bunch of them out there. There's like MycoCurb, there's MycoBan. Most of them will have a sodium aluminum silicate in them. Some of them break them down and use their really long technical name, which isn't coming to mind right now. A bunch of them you'll see like propionic acid in there as a preservative. Some use ethoxyquin as a preservative. And I don't want nothing to do with ethoxyquin. They've got so many studies that link that to cancer and skin disorders in dogs and cats. It's like, when I read an ingredient list for somebody, if I see ethoxyquin or BHA, BHT in it, it's no, that right there stops the conversation. That we're done.
Writing that down. BHA, BHT, and what was the other ones?
Ethoxyquin. ETHOX. Screwed that up already. ETHOXYQUINE, I think.
If those are on there, don't buy the feed.
I don't. I mean, I steer people away from them, right? That's a quick red flag for me. Why do I want to put a carcinogen into my animal that I intend to eat the meat or eggs out of? Okay. And people dig around out there and find there is scientific studies, not just Google responses from Susie Housewife, that will tell you that toxin has a lot. It's a known carcinogen, right? But it is the cheapest, probably the most effective antioxidant or / preservative that is available to the feed industry. Nobody in the horse or the pet food industry will touch it, right? It's not even an option, right? Because those groups of people, equine people and pet owners, they're fully aware of the negative side effects of toxin. Now, I shouldn't say nobody uses it. There are still some pet food companies that do. But most of the time when I see dogs with the tumorous bumps on them and things like that, if I go back at the feed that they've been eating and so on, I'll usually find the toxin or BHT or BHA or one of those. Eventually, the liver just can no longer filter that crap out. Just the animal's just bombarded with too many byproducts and chemical components. Right? They just can't deal with it anymore. But,
So we're trying to solve one problem by creating another.
Exactly.
All right. So how does all of this go to manure?
All right. So early indications are of mycotoxins. So when you're seeing a mycotoxin, if it's a mycotoxin, and there's other problems with manure, but mycotoxin will tend to be, you're going to start to see looser. Okay. The bird's going to drink more and eat less. So this is actually pretty important for all poultry owners to understand, is we need a way to monitor how much feed the bird ate and how much water the bird drank, right? Even if we do it at a flock level. So if you feed 25 pounds of feed, which is enough for 100 chickens, right? Then they should consume 50 pounds of water. Right? It's not really that hard to do. Right. So even if you want to look at it from a 5-gallon bucket standpoint, 5 gallons of water is 43 pounds. Okay. So that should be pretty close to, they consume 20 pounds of feed. Anytime that ratio gets severely out of line, right, then we have to start looking for some sort of health issue. And I really think mycotoxin type issues are being misdiagnosed by a large amount of poultry keepers out there. And they start thinking they got coccidiosis or they got worms. The next thing I know, they're grabbing Corid or they're grabbing Ivomec or they're doing something and they don't really know what they had. Somebody said, oh, that's coccidiosis. You better give Corid. You can get loose manure from a whole bunch of things, right? It's not always coccidiosis and it's rarely worms, but that's the easy thing to do. And everybody's scared. So mycotoxins are going to give you loose manure. I'll tell you what, you feed too many table scraps to your chickens, too many greens, whether it's lettuce, carrot tops, beet tops, whatever, they're going to get loose manure. And it's not a mycotoxin. They consumed more fluid that day. They drank more water that day, which caused that manure to be runny. It's probably going to stick to their back end, right? Again, another big red flag. People think, oh, I got cocci. The manure is sticking to their back end. No, well, you don't have cocci. And probably fed them something they weren't used to. And, they got the Hershey squirts. So just don't get excited. If you don't see blood in the manure, you don't have cocci.
I had somebody want to argue with me the other day because they were trying to figure out what they could grow for their birds to eat. And this specific question was about quail. And I was like, why don't you just feed them game bird starter, grower, layer pellets? Like, why don't you just feed them that? Because, you shouldn't feed them plants. And they're like, that's what they eat in the wild, so why can't they eat that here? And I'm like,
we'll be right back.
Looking to rock some seriously comfy gear? If you love chickens and you're all about that fun style, then Chicken Box has got the perfect t-shirts for you. From quirky designs to classic looks, Their shirts are as comfy as us chicken tenders deserve. They even have a subscription service so your coop doesn't get bored. Head over to PoultryNerdsPodcast.com and click on Chicken Box to get your comfy shirts and support the podcast.
You didn't redirect them to me? You didn't redirect them to me so I could have fun with that? It was one of those enjoyable moments for me.
Unfortunately,
Quail specifically,
I think that I may have actually got kicked out of a Facebook group.
Good.
Yeah.
Quail are insect and seed eaters. Okay. That's exactly what they do in the wild. Before we turned them into what they are today, before we screwed them up, they would really ate a high level of insects. So they spent the majority of their day looking for insects, but they didn't turn down a grass seed or a native seed. They like beech nuts. They like small acorns. They can really get down some pretty big pieces if you let them.
I just asked a simple question. When was the last time you saw quail out in the wild? Because people typically hatch them out, grow them in a barn, and there's a lady that hatches out hundreds of thousands of them a year just so hunters can buy them at hunting clubs and they can shoot them.
So she must be doing bobwhite.
Yeah, that lady does bobwhite. But, that you don't really see them in the wild where they hatch because quail don't really get broody. So that was part of my whole argument with the whole thing. And their crap will look like crap, and you don't feed them spinach because that's not what they want.
But that's what I want them to eat. It's like feeding a dog vegetarian diet. I can't believe they make vegan dog. They make vegan dog for real.
Sorry if you're vegan.
Anyway.
Crazy. Anyway, so if you're feeding your indoor quail layer pellets and you have that lime green poo, what does that tell you?
So usually like a lime green, okay, the color really makes a difference. So if I see lime green for one day, if I see a spot here or there on a given day, it's actually the bile duct connected to the liver that is, it's just recycling itself, right? So when that bile duct empties out, you're going to see that lime green, almost fluorescent green kind of coloration. And it usually won't continue for more than a day. Okay. It should be extremely spotty and rare. Now I realize you got 100 quail in a pen or more, but so you might see 2 or 3 in a day. If it was feed related or if it was disease related, you'd see 50% of that daily poo showing up like that. It's just part of the natural cycle, right? They're going to do that. And whether it's chickens, no matter what fowl it is, right? That bile duct is going to regenerate itself and it's going to dump out the old bile and it's going to rebuild new. Now, under some stress conditions, they may dump that out. Okay. I don't want to see it repeatedly for more than a whole bunch of days in a row. But let's say if it's 3 or 4 out of 100, 5 out of 100 on a given day, it's nothing that I get concerned about.
All right.
Really, I'm looking for when you get a drastic color in your food and you didn't change the feed, right? You're feeding the same feed you feed them every day. And all of a sudden, what the colors I'm worried about are like when it goes all white or if it goes all yellow or rusty colored, right? That's a warning sign that something in the digestive tract is not functioning correctly. Okay. So whether they've been exposed to some sort of outside bacteria, basically giving them a stomach flu or something like poisoning. And if you've ever had food poisoning, you know what it's like, right? You eat something 4 hours later, you don't want to be more than about 10 steps from a toilet. And that can happen to our animals as well. And it's often misdiagnosed. Like that wet feed you were talking about, Gary. If I kept that and I fed through that for 3 days, I'm gonna see a whole bunch of food poisoning going on in those birds.
Got it.
And then it's going to end up being misdiagnosed, which can be annoying. It is annoying, actually, but we're doing this so people are better educated and more informed. So hopefully more quail don't die from the overuse of cord.
What is yellow, loose, runny stool?
So actually, when it's that sulfury yellow, like that bright yellow kind of color, daffodil yellow, if that's a better correlation for you, that's actually a sign that the bird probably hasn't eaten for quite a while, and the digestive tract is empty. And the last thing that pushes out is that yellow, and because that's the accumulation. So the bird's kind of feeding on itself, and in the gut, there's no feed for the bacteria to feed on. So it'll build up that bright yellow, sulfur-looking, slimy manure, slimy poop, and then that's what it'll. So it's really a sign of an empty digestive tract, and the bird is not eating. Then we have to figure out what. Do they have a fever? Is it stress related? Try and figure out. Again, if I see 1 in 100, I don't get overly excited. If I see 10% or more, then I really start getting excited. First thing I would do is change out, get a different bag of feed just to make sure that it wasn't the feed. I'd get a fresh bag.
The one I'm envisioning is more like baby poop yellow, where that, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know.
There's one that's a little bit more. There's one that's a little bit more to an orange color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
similar to, yeah, there you go. Yeah. So when it leans a little bit more to the orange versus the bright fluorescent yellow, that is a Clostridium. Most of the time, that's a Clostridium bacteria gut infection. So the bird is eating something that is spoiled, probably off the ground or corner of the feeder, or this is a prime example of when feed gets wet, especially if it's in a compacted area, like in the corner of the feeder, and that gets any moisture and clumps. I don't know if you ever see clumps of feed coming out of the feed, like when you clean the feeders. All right. So the clumps have a reduced amount of oxygen content because it's all congealed together and clumpy, and it's a great growing environment for Clostridium. So to me, that is most often, not always, nothing in life is always exactly so. There's no perfect answer, but that's most of the time tends to be a Clostridium infection where they've eaten. And the weird thing about Clostridium and those clumps, next time you pull one of those clumps out, they have this uniquely, almost like sickening sweet smell to them. You may not really like it, but it does, okay? Because it has that partially fermented, wants to try to go to that alcohol wet mash type smell for those who like to make their own moonshine. And it has a little bit of an addicting or attracting smell to it, and the birds will eat it. And they like it. It makes them feel a little euphoric at first. So they come back and they keep eating it, right? Keep digging at that clump and they keep eating it. And eventually you end up, after 2 or 3 days, you end up with poop like that.
Does it kind of work itself out of the
Clostridium
system?
You can have mortality from it if those clumps don't disappear and they don't get back on, because like I said, it's habit forming, right? And that those birds are going to go back to eating it because they like it. They're going to go back there and keep eating it. So if they ate it for a week, you probably would start seeing mortality out of it. Takes about 3 days to see that kind of color poop.
So the reason why I was bringing that up is in the turkey pen, every once in a while, often enough that I notice it, but not like a daily thing, that I see that yellow poop, but nobody's died and nobody seems sick. They just keep going, but I have a hanging feeder. So that may be what it is. They're clumping up some food in there from the moisture in the air.
When you start talking about larger fowl, when we get away from quail, where they have opportunity to eat other places, so like your large fowl and your turkeys, what I start looking for are the potholes. They'll find a spot that's all kind of capped over and clumped, and then they'll start digging a hole in it, right? and they like to get down in there and they want to scratch and eat what's down below that capped off area. And those potholes are usually, I call them potholes because that's what they remind me of, but those potholes are usually the place that's holding those pathogenic bacteria. So you want to try and break up clumps. You don't want to let things get capped over with bedding, manure, and feed spillage. And so for outdoor, like your turkeys, I would encourage you to move that feeder to a new location every 3 to 4 days. But for, this is going to blow your mind, Jennifer, so just hang on to your seat. Fully matured or large turkeys honestly prefer to eat out of a 5-gallon bucket. You will be much further ahead to feed them straight out of a 5-gallon bucket than putting feed in a feeder for a turkey.
How are they going to get down in there? They're not that big.
Like your
They're
adult
adult.
bourbon reds, your adult bourbon reds will be able to eat halfway down. So here's the cycle, right? They'll eat about halfway down that bucket. Okay, they can reach down in there and they'll enjoy it. Okay, and then the next day, or when you get to that halfway mark, and you come out with, that much feed in a bucket, and you put yesterday's feed on top of what you just carried out there, and you just keep that rotation going, right? And that's how you keep it. But I'm a friend of mine up in northeastern Ohio. He went out to tend his turkeys one day, and he got so tired fighting them to put the feed in the feeder. One day he set down all of his 5-gallon buckets that he took off of his Gator or whatever 4-wheeler. And he was emptying out the feeders and moving them around and getting them where he wanted them. He turned around and every one of his turkeys were standing there eating right out of the top of the 5-gallon bucket. And they were just the happiest turkeys ever. And he had the epiphany, why am I fighting this to put feed in a feeder if they prefer the bucket anyway? So he went to feeding out of a 5-gallon bucket. And you can start this when they're younger. Like you can get the 1-gallon buckets when they're 6-8 weeks old. And as they get bigger, then you can go to the 2-gallon bucket, 3-gallon. You can step them up as they get older. They have so much more fun eating out of a bucket. Why we put it into a feed trough or a hanging feeder is beyond me. They don't care.
No, they don't. And actually that makes sense for my grow outs when I have them in the summertime. I generally use one of those deep black flex bowls and I just mound it up because by the time I get the gate locked, they've eaten half of it anyway.
Yeah.
If y'all don't have turkeys, they eat more than pigs. I swear they do. They eat a lot of feed.
Yeah. Turkeys and pigs are my 2 favorite farm animals, so we're not going to pick on them.
Oh,
They're the only 2 animals. Yeah, they're the only 2 animals that really care if you show up every day. They're happy to see you. The rest of them really don't care.
And
They
Dad,
both have great personalities.
since getting pigs, I've noticed that if they
Very
see
personal.
me or hear me, they start making that noise. And they will come to the fence and they're like, where you at? What you got? Did you bring me something to eat?
They laugh at your jokes.
Yeah.
They do. They do.
And
The
if your
turkeys love
turkeys
to
are
talk to
close
you.
enough to you, while you're talking to the pigs, the turkeys are making that it's almost like a little high-pitched chirping sound. Like they're trying to
they're
talk
happy.
and they're like, what are you talking about? Are you going to come see me? What are you bringing to me? I like that. If I could get my kids to do that, I'd like them more.
I hate to tell you this, but raising pigs is better than raising kids every day of the week.
I've got a lot, so I do have more kids than turkeys or pigs, even combined. So I could agree with that.
The ducks talk to you the most, but they can talk
Do
to
they?
you so you want them to shut up. They talk a lot.
Okay.
I like them all. I have them all. That's why I like them. So, what about duck poop? What makes it so wet and all the time? Like it comes out all the time. Is it from all the water filter feeding?
It's partly that, But also your waterfowl are better grazers. So they're going to consume more greenery than any chicken ever will. Okay. Turkeys are good. Turkeys are better than chickens. Chickens are okay at eating grass, but it's not really what they want. They'll eat some. About 5% of their diet is about all you're going to get a chicken to eat. Turkeys can be up to 10%. But now ducks, you can get up into that 20% range if you've got really good grazing for them. And they're happy. And then geese can be even higher than that if you've got the right range for them out there. Forages, ducks can get 30% off of what they're eating out there ranging around. But it's got to be the right stuff, right?
So what I got out of all this technical stuff that you gave us is to pay attention to what they're eating and then look at their poop and see if it's changed. So if you fed them, say, a bunch of watermelon, it's probably going to be a lot runnier than it was before.
It's going to be a lot runnier. Because I used to do that. Yeah, you're dead on right there, because I had a grumpy old neighbor and he always he pissed and moaned about everything he could think about, right? And one day he came over and he was complaining about my cat digging up the fish he had in the garden. He buried fish to grow his plants, and he was complaining about my cat and blah, blah. And one day I walked over and I just gave him 2 dozen eggs, right? And he didn't know what to say. A couple of days later, he ran a little fruit stand alongside the road. A couple of days later, the unsaleable cantaloupe or watermelon started showing up on my porch for the chickens. And every now and then I'd give him 12 eggs, and he was happy. He never complained about my cats again, ever. But yeah, when you crack open a watermelon, I only kept 25 to 30 chickens in the backyard for eggs for us and mom and a few friends. But they could 25 chickens can clean up a watermelon in no time. I don't know where they put it.
God, they can.
They just leave that green skin. That's all that's left.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
In the summertime, when it's going to be 100 plus, I'll get a watermelon and I'll put like a huge chunk in my grow out pen, and then I'll cut up little sections and put in my breeding pens, and they just go nuts. But it's a lot of hydration.
So no nutrition. All you did is gave them pink water. Okay.
That's fine.
Just know that. But
I feed them bougie feed.
Okay, so there's really nothing we can do at this point about mycotoxins except keep our feed dry, right?
You can. I know, you didn't ask me that question. You said, What are we doing about it? So there are some excellent products on the market. The one I stand behind is a product called Redmond Conditioner. It's made by Redmond Minerals in Redmond, Utah. And that's how it got its name. It's not a person. So
that's a lot of Redmond.
That's a lot of Redmond. So it's actually a volcanic ash deposit from whenever the continental shift or whatever happened out there in Utah. And they just go scrape it off the top, and has excellent toxin binding effects for pretty much all animals. Right? So yeah, we could add this to the feed, usually add it at about 1%. So 4 ounces for every 25 pounds of feed. And that does a really nice job. And I'd much rather see people using that versus looking for chemicals to try and kill something.
So that will bind up the mycotoxin so it doesn't affect the birds?
Right. So most of the mycotoxins are positively charged ions. Now we're going to get into some different kind of chemistry stuff here, and I don't want to lose people. So we're going to keep this as basic as I can make it. So clay particles, those ash particles, are negatively charged, and most mycotoxins are positively charged. So those clay particles will attach, just like when we played with magnets in grade school. Okay. They're going to attract and attach, and they don't allow them to be absorbed or enter into the bloodstream, and they'll come out the backside of the chicken. And we have Now, it will make it'll also dry up. So if the poop is a little too runny, it's a great way to recondition the gut. Even if you don't have mycotoxins, it'll recondition that gut and it'll get your poop back to normal moisture levels or viscosity. Really an excellent product.
Okay, is just for the sake of conversation, is there anything else like you might have around your house that would do the same thing?
Not really. Not that I can think of. Nothing popped for it. Unless you're keeping activated charcoal, you can get activated charcoal quicker because you can get it at pretty much any pharmacy. So if you weren't prepared and something hit your flock, you could run down and get a couple pounds of activated charcoal. But by the time you buy it at Walgreens, CVS, or wherever you go, it's pretty expensive at that point. You could, now, Jennifer, you're one of those people, you could make your own biochar, which is activated charcoal, and you could keep some on hand all the time, right? So that would work for you. Not everybody's going to make biochar, but biochar would be almost as good at buffering out the toxins. And actually, if people want to actually start making biochar, I'm all in for letting people free choice it. Don't mix it in the feed. You just like you do with your grit and your oyster shell kind of thing. If you wanted biochar out there and let the birds self-dose on it, they know they can figure it out. We don't need to choke them with it. And as long as it's easy to find, they'll find it.
Cool. Is there anything else we need to know before we wrap it up for the day?
There's
I got
There's
another
lots.
question.
I could talk about poop forever.
Will apple cider vinegar kill your birds in the summertime?
I'm on my 29th year and I have never, ever seen that happen. Right? I have only seen positive effects with the apple cider vinegar, but where they're coming up with, I've seen those posts and I've seen people talk about it and I have no idea how they come up to that conclusion. But it's going to cause some sort of coccidiosis or something and increase the heat stress on the bird. I've never seen that. And apple cider vinegar combined with other things has been used for more than 500 years as an electrolyte replacement for farmers, for pretty much everything.
I was going to say, don't commercial poultry houses buy it either in the 55-gallon drum or in the 275-gallon tote and inject it into their water?
Some do.
All the time?
Yeah, some do. Yeah, they're running it at 200 to 1 or 100 to 1, something like that. It gets expensive on a commercial level, and they're targeting certain windows of opportunity when they may run into necrotic enteritis or coccidiosis. They also know that acidifying a chicken's gut, the digestive tract of poultry, actually increases feed efficiency and keeps them healthier, right? So they're less likely to get pathogenic bacteria, coccidiosis, things like that. So it's a pretty good preventative. Like I said, I have no idea where that post came from. I've only seen it once and I haven't tracked it back, but where people are talking about apple cider vinegar will deplete calcium from their bones. That's another one that I hear. If your feed has the correct amount of calcium in it, no, it's not going to do that. So people also don't understand that even though you feed dietary calcium to your birds for the eggshells, there's always a transfer of calcium from the bloodstream to the bone, and then from the bone to make an egg. So it's part of the normal routine. All the calcium for an egg does not come out of the digestive tract.
Okay. I was just curious about that because people have every summer it's this huge thing, and I'm like, mine drink it every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
All
never.
right.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
All right. We appreciate you coming on with us today and talking about your favorite subject.
We didn't get a whole lot of poop. We got stuck on mycotoxins, but we had a little bit of poop. So the bottom line is, if you don't see red in the poop that looks blood red, okay, not this little, not okay. If you don't see blood colored red in the poop, it's not coccidiosis. Okay. And you can prove me wrong. Take a manure sample, do a fecal float, count the eggs, count the oocyst in a gram of whatever poop. Okay. I don't care if it's yours, your chickens, your quails, your dogs, whatever. It's pretty much universal. So there is supposed to be, for a healthy poultry digestive tract, there should be between 40 and 60 coccidiosis, oocyst, or egg, if you will, in every gram of poultry. Okay. It's supposed to be there. If I see numbers below 40, I'm really worried. That bird is not healthy at all. Okay? When you get above 60, you can start to be a little bit concerned. Really, you don't see blood in the poop until you get up around 100.
Are you suggesting that a digestive system is like an ecosystem and like they all coexist in there?
Everything's an ecosystem, from the world scale to all the way down to the soil. If you pulled up a gram of soil and you look, okay, there's this many nematodes and this many coccidiosis and this many bacteria and this many fungi, everything is a microbiome at its own level. People check their own poop, they're going to be amazed. There's coccidiosis in there, and it's supposed to be there.
It's all about balance.
It's all about balance.
Yeah. I agree. Wholeheartedly.
Well, sterile people guys in there.
We're supposed to eat a balanced diet. So if it
Yeah,
works
but
for
we
people,
don't.
if that's what people should do, that's what everything should do. It makes sense.
And people should get out of the way and quit making things imbalanced. Right? They just need to roll with it. They need to check the numbers, right? They need to pick up an old used microscope somewhere that still works. They need to learn how to do their own fecal floats. They need to quit having knee-jerk reactions. They need to quit overreacting. Right? I mean, you do subtle changes to fix things. You don't go in with something that ends in CID and kill everything and start. Because every time you do that, you start over, right? You just cleaned the chalkboard and you cleaned the slate. We're starting over. And that actually drags down the immune system of the bird, because immunity for every creature is in the gut and how well it functions. And the immunity of every living creature depends on its digestive tract.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
We'll pick it up later.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us this week. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they are released. And they're released every week. Feel free to email us at poultrynerds@gmail.com to share your thoughts about the show. Until next time, Poultry Pals, keep clucking, keep learning, and keep it exciting. This is Carey signing off from Poultry Nerds. Feathers up, everyone.